study how African Americans historically have interpreted the Bible. And so that's the reason I wrote Pillars of Cloud and Fire. It begins to look at African American biblical interpretation from the antebellum period, starting with slavery. And I look at various examples. A radical example and a conservative example in the antebellum period, beginning with Absalom Jones and David Walker. I move on to look at Reconstruction with Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and John Jasper. The Harlem Renaissance with Zora Neale Hurston. Then the era of civil rights with Adam Clayton Powell and Martin Luther King Jr. And finally, I look at the era of Black Power with Albert Clegg. Each one takes up the book of Exodus, but takes it up in a very different way. And they take it up based on what I talked about earlier. That is, what are the relevant challenges that my community faces? How can I continue to make the Word of God, the Bible, relevant? And so during the antebellum period, Absalom Jones and David Walker both take up the story of Exodus almost literally. That if God delivered the children of Israel from Egypt, across the Red Sea into the Promised Land, then God will do the same. And the Promised Land was freedom from slavery. Well, freedom from slavery came, and we weren't free. We faced Jim Crow and segregation. And so if you go to the era of Reconstruction, and you look at sermons, the Promised Land doesn't look like freedom from slavery. Emancipation is no longer identified with the Promised Land. Uplift is. Well, how do we educate now? How do we move from just emancipation to education and the kind of cultural attainment that will lift Black communities? And after Reconstruction, that changes again in the Harlem Renaissance. This idea that we need to throw off the manacles of slavery, the old Southern sort of African American rebirth. And a rebirth. That's right. The Renaissance man. Renaissance man, Renaissance woman. But for the Harlem Renaissance writers, for the most part, except for Zora Neale Hurston, they were really thinking rather in sexist terms. So they were thinking the new Negro was the new Negro man. But Zora Neale Hurston, I thought, was one of the most interesting figures during that time. Her Moses, Man of the Mountain, helped African Americans rethink the Exodus story in a way that took the focus off a singular figure like a Moses figure and put it on the community and asked us to imagine together what it would mean if we all together walked into the Promised Land and we weren't waiting for or dependent upon one singular figure